Life can be hard. Whether it's our personal circumstances, perhaps we struggle to make ends meet, or our job is just really tough and a grind, or there's difficult relationships that we have to endure. Every family has at least one of those, right? Or maybe our lives are hard, actually, not simply because of our circumstances or our relational surrounding or whatever it might be, but actually because we're a Christian. And being a Christian has made our lives more difficult, not less. Have you ever experienced something like that? We have the moral, ethical challenges that you face sometimes in work, and you think, gosh, as a Christian, how do I navigate this challenge? Or if you're a parent, raising your kids to know and follow Jesus, that can be really difficult. Or maybe you're struggling with sin, and if you weren't a Christian, you wouldn't even care about it. Life can be really hard sometimes. And when life is difficult, it can be very discouraging, can't it? Maybe, like me, you found yourself from time to time asking yourself, why isn't God helping me? Why isn't God doing something about this? Why doesn't he care about me? Has he forgotten me? Does he not love me? Well, the book of Hebrews is really helpful for us, I think, when we're talking about enduring hard things, because it's written to a group of persecuted, struggling Christians. Back in chapter 10, in verses 32 to 35, the writer outlines some of these hard things that people have been going through. They've been insulted for following Jesus. They've been persecuted. They've had their property taken away from them. Some of them have been put in prison. And in verse 35, he says, do not throw away your confidence, your hope, your faith in God. Don't throw it away. It will be richly rewarded. I guess there were people in that church community who were thinking, I just don't want to do this anymore. This is too hard. This is not worth it. I think I might give up following Jesus. Well, if you've ever found yourself in that space, and I'm sure at some point in the future you will find yourself there again, there is a word of encouragement for us here in chapter 12 that we just read together. We're encouraged to do two things particularly to help us endure hard things and to keep going as Christians. The first is this: consider Jesus. Consider Jesus. When we think about who Jesus is and what he has done for us, when we chew that over in our minds, when we meditate on it and really think about these things, we start to realize in our hardships that, well, first, he knows how we feel. No matter how hard our lives are, Jesus' life was harder. The cross was the most difficult thing any person had to ever endure. And Jesus has been through that. Which means he understands us. He sympathizes with us. He knows how we feel in our hardships. And it also means that he can show us the way through it. Following Jesus is walking the path of the cross. What it means to be a disciple, as Jesus says elsewhere, is to take up our cross and follow him. And so the Christian life is one of living out the death and the resurrection as we experience life through hard, difficult things. And Jesus also shows us, as we consider his work on the cross, that it's worth it. Hebrews 12 says, for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross. He didn't just look at the cross and see it as an end in itself and just think, well, it's miserable, but being miserable is good, so let's just do that. What motivated Jesus to endure the cross was the joy beyond it. And so as we consider Christ and we think about one day I'll be with him, that actually helps us in those hardships to endure in moments when life is really difficult. So consider Jesus. That's the first thing that Hebrews 12 tells us. And the second thing is this: endure hardship as discipline. I think as a dad, I know that one of my jobs, if I am to be a good dad to Jack and Owen, is to discipline them, to give them consequences and boundaries so that their character is formed in a positive way, so that they're shaped, so that they grow. And they don't like it all of the time. Man, if I take the Nintendo Switch away for whatever reason, that's not a happy moment for them, but it's a necessary moment often, as they have to think about the decisions that they're making and grow as young men. And what Hebrews 12 tells us is that God uses our difficulties like that in order to grow us. And what that should encourage us with is that none of the difficulties and the suffering and the challenges in our lives are meaningless. They're not empty. God is at work in you, achieving his purpose in you, bringing forth that harvest of righteousness and peace that it talks about in verses 10 and 11. He's actually working through the hardships to make you more like Jesus. And that in itself is a huge encouragement. But it also tells you that suffering is not a sign that God doesn't love you. It's actually an evidence that your Father is very present in your life. And because he loves you, he is using these things as discipline to care for you and to grow you. Fathers who don't discipline their children are not loving them well. Good fathers take the time to invest in their kids, love them, and grow them. And that's what God does for us in hardship. That, as we consider Jesus and we understand that enduring hardship is discipline, God's good discipline at work in our lives, gives us that encouragement to keep going, to keep trusting God as hard things come into our life. So we're going to talk about that together in our groups this evening. I hope you have a really good time discussing it. I hope it's a real encouragement to you, and I look forward to seeing you all again this coming Sunday.